Hey, what's happening, guys? What's going on YouTube? You've tuned into Rules for Rebels. I wanted to share an interesting article that I saw yesterday on The Guardian. And the article is titled, Stick It to Corporate America, Why We Are So Willing to Steal from Work. And it goes on to say the rate of occupational fraud has doubled as employees steal laptops, data, and ideas from their companies. Now, I actually found this article on the Anti-Work Forum. There's two kind of interesting forums I've been following lately. One is r/anti-work, and the other one is r/lost generation. Now, I think these forums bring up some interesting societal issues. What I don't like about the forums is they're both, socialist forums, essentially. I would say Lost Generation much more so than Anti-Work. But they're both very, very socialist. And being an entrepreneur, I'm very much so a capitalist. I'm very much so for the government kind of staying out of our lives and people being able to kind of work hard and kind of reap the fruits of their labor, so to speak. But one thing that I'm seeing that I think is kind of troubling and kind of bad for employees and bad for employers is I feel like things have never been more divided. There's very much so an us versus them mentality. Corporations are bad, entrepreneurs are bad, business owners are bad, and to some extent, people who are even having some level of success in life, even if they're working for other people, a lot of these, I think a lot of people are kind of disgruntled and kind of unhappy with where they are in their lives. And even the people who are having success are bad, even if they're not business owners or whatever else. And I think this kind of comes down to a couple things. I think part of it is definitely, employers are not taking care of employees like they used to in the past. I will say, kind of just to play devil's advocate and kind of stick up for the other side, I will say I think there is somewhat of a sense of entitlement and maybe a little bit of, I don't know if immaturity is the right word, kind of the whole millennial trashing thing. And I think it's evident not only in the workplace. You could say, okay, well, millennials are the way they are because, there's no loyalty from companies and employers treat us like shit. And there may be some truth to that, but it extends beyond the employee-employer relationship. Like, look at the whole, right now there's a lot of articles and things like that coming out about how employees are ghosting employers. So either they're not showing up for interviews, or people who have jobs are not only quitting and not giving 2 weeks notice, but are just like never showing up, never calling, never even telling their employer that they quit. But this extends beyond the workplace, right? Like the whole term ghosting for employers to talk about employees ghosting them came from the dating world. And I feel like in past times, if you were going to break up with somebody, you broke up with them in person. You had the guts to tell them to their face, look, I'm not happy in this, or this isn't working out. And now, everyone's kind of pussies. Like, nobody wants to deal with confrontation. Nobody wants to upset anybody else. So, even in relationships, so outside of the workplace, young people, and not even young people, I think everybody these days, if you want to break up with somebody, you either cheat on them or you just act distant until they get so sick of it that they break up with you, or you just ghost them, you just disappear and never talk to somebody again who you were dating or whatever else. So, this goes beyond the employer-employee relationship. It seems to be kind of evident in kind of all areas of society, so I don't know that we can completely blame employers for this, but I definitely think there's a divide. Like I said, there's very much so an us versus them atmosphere, and never in history before has there been I don't know if I want to say never in history, but in recent history in the modern workplace, there in the past has never been such a discrepancy between what the lowest employee at a company is paid and what the CEO is paid. And I think that kind of leads to a lot of people kind of getting upset, and kind of leads to this us versus them mentality. Another thing that's kind of interesting about this is it's not just big corporations, right? It's one thing if you want to say, okay, Amazon's an evil corporation, Jeff Bezos is an asshole, they make way too much money, they're way too big, they're way too powerful, they're getting in bed with the American government and the NSA to spy on Americans, like fuck them. But this kind of attitude seems to be kind of extending even down to small businesses, like even the guy who owns a convenience store, even the guy who owns a pizza shop. A lot of people, oh, he's the asshole, he's the boss. When in reality, this guy's, grinding it out to make 50 grand a year, and try to run a business and support his family. I think there's a big difference between kind of that and the Jeff Bezoses. But, this article just kind of highlights this divide we're seeing between employer and employee, between corporations and people. I think not that long ago, I feel like the relationship between a company or an employer and the employee was a lot better. Even 10, 20 years ago, I think there were people who to some extent enjoyed their jobs, felt that their employers kind of took care of them, kind of felt some pride in working for the company they worked for. And if you want to go way back, I know my grandpa worked for the Pullman rail car company, and they were actually kind of a shitty company. They kind of took advantage of their employees. It's kind of an interesting historical thing. They were in Chicago in the Pullman neighborhood, and basically like they provided the housing for their employees. They had the stores, so as an employee you got paid and all your money went back to Pullman. But my grandpa worked for Pullman for a long time. He really liked it. I think my dad worked at the same job for 25 years. He was kind of proud to work there. He was kind of dedicated to the company. And even more recently, there's oddly enough, there's kind of a weird YouTube niche of people who worked for UPS, and there's one particular guy, I forget his name. The reason I know about this, my girlfriend worked for UPS for, 8-9 years. She worked there from when she was like 16 to when she was like 23, 24. And UPS used to be a place that people really liked and were proud to work for. I actually used to live in an area where a lot of UPS, probably like 10 people in my neighborhood worked for UPS. And a lot of these guys started out as drivers or started out in a warehouse, and a lot of them wound up making it to, upper management or even executive positions. And they had a lot of pride in the company that they worked for, and they had their UPS jackets and were proud to be brown and all that stuff. And, fast forward to today, UPS will only give you part-time. I think they pay people $10 an hour for a very, very hard job working in the heat and the cold. It takes a year to get onto benefits. My girlfriend worked for UPS, I think from maybe going back to when they were still kind of employee-friendly, up until when things kind of started turning. But when my girlfriend was like 23, this is a couple years back, she had worked for UPS again for like 8-9 years. She wound up getting breast cancer, came back twice, wound up going through 2 rounds of chemo and radiation. And while she was going through this, continued to work, had been a dedicated employee. And while she was going through this, they wound up firing her and cutting her insurance. So we were paying out of pocket for her to go get, I forget what, I don't know if they call them CAT scans or PET scans or something like that, paying for her tamoxifen, paying for her chemo and radiation. And kind of while she was going through chemo and radiation, she actually got injured at work. We're in Chicago. Caterpillar, like the Caterpillar manufacturer. They're also in. I think they're downstate or maybe out in Oswego or something like that. But because they're in the area, a lot of their stuff goes through the UPS hubs in Chicago. And my girlfriend was working in some type of big, 70-pound piece of like rebar or something came down the chute, hit her in the knee, fucked up her knee. She wound up having to get 2 knee surgeries. So kind of in addition to the cancer, it was actually like a workplace injury that sort of in a way kind of led to her being fired. She wound up having like a lawsuit with them, wound up getting about 25 grand. But I mean, that was like barely enough to, I don't even think it was enough to kind of pay for the knee surgeries that were a result of her working there, plus kind of cut her off of insurance while she was going through cancer treatments, which was kind of shitty. So what can Brown do for you? Not much. But I realize I've gone on kind of a long rant, but I wanted to kind of get into to reading this article. But I think that kind of that story kind of highlights how employers used to be a little bit more friendly to employees, and I think that kind of kept employees a little bit happier, kept them a little bit more loyal to the company. And this article kind of goes on to talk about how people are okay stealing from their employers because everybody feels they're being slighted by their employers. Now, I'm kind of curious to hear from you guys, like how common is theft from the workplace, whether it be time theft, IP theft, stealing companies' clients lists. Is it okay? Isn't it okay? I think we all have to look ourselves in the mirror. We all have kind of our own moral compass. And even if somebody's fucking you over, at the end of the day, if you took a job for an agreed upon amount of money, you really don't have any reason to bitch, right? Like if you're unhappy with it, go quit and go find another job or go start your own business. I do think employers kind of steal from us in a lot of ways. I can't tell you how many friends who take on a job. And when we take on a job, right, like the employer is trying to get as much out of us for as little money as they can. We're trying to get as much money out of the employer for as little as we can give up in terms of time, energy, whatever. And it's kind of a little bit of a cat and mouse game. But what companies are starting to do a lot is, I take this job for $45,000 a year, and it's kind of agreed upon that I'm going to work 8 or 9 hours a day, and these are going to be my duties. And then employers wind up, firing other people or laying off other people, and then stacking their job duties onto you. So you're still making that $45,000 a year, but as opposed to that 8 or 9 hours a day that you agreed to, you're now working 10, 11, 12 hours a day, as opposed to this one job that you agreed to do for $45,000. Now you've taken on 2 other people's jobs, but you're not seeing a pay increase for the added work. With my last job, and we're probably going back 4 years, but they were short-staffed. I wound up not taking a bunch of my vacation time. My manager swore up and down that she'd make sure that I either got paid out for it or got to take it later. Never wound up happening, and when I left the company, I think they owed me about 3 weeks of vacation, which I wasn't making great money, but it was probably like $6,000 or something like that. Employers, I think, steal from employees too, but it just, I guess kind of the point I'm trying to make is things seem very, very divided. It's a very us versus them mentality on both sides. Kind of moving on to this article, it is surely no big deal to steal a ballpoint pen from the office stationery cupboard or some paper, but what about a mug, some furniture, a laptop? Many Americans apparently think it's fine to steal almost anything you can from work, a new report has found. The study by Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, ACFE, found that non-cash property theft, which spans everything from notebooks to Nespresso machines to personal data, by employees has almost doubled in the U.S. in recent years, from 11% of occupational fraud cases in 2002 to 21% in 2018. I think part of this is probably it's a lot easier to track this type of stuff with everything being digital and technology and things like that, but I do think it's probably increased as well. And they predict that the rate of fraud will continue to rise. According to the anti-fraud organization, workers ranging from entry-level employees to C-suite executives are all at it, with corporate fraud costing business globally more than $7 billion in losses between January 2016 and October 2017 alone. Jacob Parks, one of the authors of the ACFE report and Associate General Counsel at the organization, points to the changing nature of workplace fraud to explain the rise. Much of the non-cash fraud that's happening now is theft of intangible property like client details, copyright, business ideas, and data. As data becomes an increasing asset on organizations' balance sheets, it becomes more attractive to steal, Parks says. And kind of an example of this happening in the modern era is a lot of Amazon employees are starting to take Amazon data and sell it to third-party sellers or Amazon FBA sellers. Such is the normality of workplace stealing that it doesn't seem to have the same stigma as other crimes and has almost become socially acceptable. A designer probably captured the sentiment of many when she said, I guess we all feel like freebies and people work so hard that it's our little statement of I deserve it, even if it's not mine. But for some, it is claimed as a political act, albeit one that neatly dovetails with self-interest. One creative who has stolen clothing, alcohol, and a hard drive and nesting tables from work told The Guardian that he does it to redress the power balance, or as he puts it, stick it to corporate America. Taking this idea a few steps further, the international anarchist collective Crime Ethic, Nick, runs an annual Steal Something from Work Day to coincide with U.S. Tax Day, aimed at recognizing workplace theft as an act of undercover protest. I'm not sure why it falls on tax day. Like, if you got a beef with the government, steal from the government. Why are you going to steal from your boss or your employer? We'd prefer to live in an egalitarian society in which everyone has direct access to resources they need, but so long as we don't, we think it is important to reflect on the ways ordinary people get by in the prevailing order. Explained by anonymous spokesperson by email. Lisa Penny, an associate professor at USF Sarasota Manatee and a specialist in counterproductive work behavior, said organizational justice plays a significant role in workplace theft. If people feel they're being paid unfairly, treated unfairly, meaning that procedures, decisions about promotions are not being administered fairly, without bias, if they feel they are being disrespected by their supervisors, all these things can factor into employee theft, she says. When workers are under stress and feel like they cannot control their work environment, she says, they might withhold effort, take long breaks, or steal to try to regain some power. Generally, prosecution of employment fraud is in decline, according to ACFE report, because companies fear the potential reputational damage of pressing charges. The low probability of legal consequences is probably a motivating factor for some. But for those whose bosses decide to prosecute, the consequences can be grave. In 2015, a former Philadelphia Water Department employee was sentenced to 2 years in prison after he was involved in a multi-million-dollar ink cartridge scam. And this is kind of a common one. I've actually heard this happening a lot. People who are in charge of the purchasing at their companies, ink cartridges seem to be a big one, because ink cartridges, I think the cost has come down in recent years, but I mean, shoot, like my brother printer takes like I don't know, like $100 ink cartridge. So, you know, if every time you place an order for ink cartridges for the office, you order an extra 2 or 3, and you take those home and sell them on eBay, you know, yourself, well, you know, there's an extra $300 a month. So that's a common one. One of my clients, actually, who I'm working with, they actually it was before they kind of took over the company, but they actually had an employee who was stealing items out of their warehouse and reselling them on eBay. And it was literally to the tune of millions of dollars. So yeah, this stuff does happen. Occupational property theft is nothing new. It's a phenomenon with literally ancient roots. In their article, Employee Theft as a Social Exchange Process, researchers Gerald Greenberg and Kimberly S. Scott cite Egyptian papyri describing scribes stealing fabric and grain from the temple storage. So, you know, I guess in a sense this has been going on forever. But this latest spike is probably down to increased job security, said Dr. Yannick Greep, assistant professor at the University of Calgary and an expert in industrial and organizational psychology. Despite buoyant employment rates, for many Americans, stagnant wages and the gig economy are contributing to a mounting sense of uncertainty. If you no longer perceive your job is secure, which is very common in the gig economy, you're more likely to get the idea of a free-for-all, Greep said. So I think that is the end of the article. Let's take a jaunt down to the comments and see kind of what people in the comments have to say. Okay, let's see. Pruning says, they pretend to pay us and we pretend to respect them. Tyler Durden strikes again and again. So I think that's a reference to Fight Club, which that's actually a great movie. I actually got to watch it. I haven't seen that in years. But Chris Grum disagrees. He says, they didn't pretend to pay you. They do pay you at an amount that you agreed upon in a contract. If you didn't agree with the amount, you shouldn't have signed the contract. And people did steal, not pretending to, but actually done so, which is a crime. In both cases, the companies are in the right and the people are in the wrong. You know, I agree with that. At the end of the day, if you take it, you know, if you're not happy with the pay of a job, don't take a job. If the role in a job changes over time and you're stacked with more work, you know, either speak up and demand a raise or move on. I realize that that's easier said than done, but you know, I think that's the right thing to do. These people are theft. They deserve to be fired on site and prosecuted. You don't take back a little something without agreement. You said the company has been stealing your time and your life. Did they pay you a salary? If so, they didn't steal. If they didn't pay you the amount that you wanted, that means you suck at negotiating or you valued yourself more than what the market thinks you are worth. Corporations are greedy. So what? Did they break the law? No. You stole. You did break the law. Yes, you did. Big difference. If you don't like how the corporation treats you, leave, find another job, start your own business, then treat your employees as how you would like to be treated. but the said corporation has no obligation to make things better for you just because you want it. I work for a corporation myself, and they are treating me well. I fully understand that I am just a number. Therefore, I need to demonstrate my value by working so the company decides to see me as an asset and treat me well. If I don't perform, I fully expect the company to throw me out like trash. If you don't provide value for the company, you have no place there. If the company values you, you don't need to steal. They will give you what you want. And I think that's a great point. Make yourself valuable. Develop skills that make you valuable. People who are able to work remotely, people who are able to take long lunches or work from home, a lot of times the reason they're able to do that is because they have an in-demand skill set and they demand that. So, if I'm very valuable to my employer and I go to them and I'm like, look, there's really no reason for me to be in the office 8 hours a day. I was offered another remote position, or I'm looking for other remote positions. I do a good job for you. You can look at my metrics. I need to work from home 3 days a week. And, if you're valuable, they're not going to want to lose you. They know that you're a good employee and you bring value. And they're going to let you do something like that. If you don't really have any unique skills, if you don't bring a lot of value to the organization, then you're just a number, and they're not going to go along with things like that. But, I think something that a lot of us don't like to realize is that in life, I think everything is transactional, like even down to your friendships. I know people love each other and whatever else, but there's an argument that can be made that like everything is transactional. You're friends with them for a reason, because of something they can do for you. Maybe they, make you happy, maybe they whatever else, but the reason that you're friends with your friends is because you get something out of that relationship. It's transactional. And I've even heard people argue, like down to the point of, you could say, oh, well, parents love their kids unconditionally. But even in that sense, when a mother loves their child, in some sense, it's because they're getting something out of that. So in a sense, everything is transactional, even down to your friendships and your relationships and your family. So definitely, a corporation isn't just going to be nice to you just to be nice to you. It's everything is transactional, especially in the workplace. This guy obviously disagrees. He thinks corporations are evil. I notice in anti-work and Lost Generation, they call people bootlickers who are, happy with their jobs or run businesses or whatever else. So do you deep throat that boot, or do you take your time to savor its leathery goodness, says Dana Schultz. Let's see. I thought this one was clever. Apparently there's a National Be a Pirate Day. I suggest Steal Something from Workday should coincide with International Talk Like a Pirate Day. Arr! I've hornswoggled all the coffee pods, you filthy bilge rats. This will give Steal from your Workday global relevance and a delightful eccentricity. Let's see. Andia 2015 says, this is a moral minefield. Of course it's wrong to steal from your employer, but be it a pen or a laptop, I can see why people feel justified because they work extra long hours for no pay, receive inconsequential salary increases, or none at all. The thing is, hours you work beyond your contracted number is in your own control. Just don't work longer. And a lot of people would say, okay, well, if I refuse to stay late or whatever, my boss will fire me. Test them. If you're really unhappy and you really don't want to stay late, say, Bill, I work from 9 to 6. I'm getting the fuck out of here. And, if Bill wants to fire you, he's going to fire you. And if you bring value to the company, Bill will probably just let you go home at 6 because it's better than losing you. Also, you can raise your salary concerns with your employer. Just don't automatically expect to get a raise without giving something in return, or find another job. Trouble is, if stealing from your employer is acceptable, why is it not acceptable to avoid paying taxes or minimizing the taxes you pay? Surely that is as valid. Stealing is stealing. End of. It's unacceptable and should not be tolerated. T Cement says, perhaps the fact that we have an unabashed, nay boastful fraudster in the White House has a little something to do with it. Let's see. Rob Lipton says, corporations are people too. Am I right? Okay, that's kind of arguing about how the Supreme Court said that corporations are people. I think that's something in regards to donating to political campaigns and things like that. If you steal from work, you are throwing away your honor. It doesn't matter that what you think about the corporation. If you steal, you are a thief. You did it to yourself. And I kind of agree with that. You know, we all have our own kind of moral judgments. We all have to look ourselves in the mirror and, you know, kind of the whole two wrongs don't make a right thing. Hugh Montgomery says, no surprise, just people being people. They've been like this since the Garden of Eden or Ape Mountain, depending on one's politics. Some of those commenting could do a look with Wells Fargo frauds. As an example, the unintended consequence of corporate greed squeezing employees. So I think that's with Wells Fargo is opening up fake bank accounts in people's names without permission to bolster their numbers. And I think that is kind of a good point, right? Two wrongs don't make a right. But if companies can completely ignore the law and do wrong, well, you know, well, fuck you. I'll do the same thing to you. Let's see. F. Stigma says, you steal my life, I steal your paper clips. Eric Mintz says, I expect theft will increase as trust in our institutions declines. Let's see. Y. Truk says, sounds like BS guesswork. People stealing stuff that is on the books for $1,000, which is now actually worth $100, so the company writes it off at $500. Bet lots of stuff gets lost or nobody made records of it when it was dumped, so it's presumed stolen and written off. Let's see. Because corporations are all dishonest at this point in history. They have no pride, no honor, no honesty, just mindless, numbing greed. And this is kind of, you know, when I talked about the divide between, you know, employers and employees and corporations and people, you know, everyone's painting everybody with a broad brush. And there are some good companies out there. There are some employee-friendly companies that do take care of their employees. Let's see, they always were. Corporations function as psychopaths just by the nature of how they are constructed. Getting angry at large corporations for being immoral is like getting angry at a wild animal for attacking people. It's 100% pointless. This thing simply does not have a value system. Since corporate America steals your time, your money, and even your life, a little self-motivated pilfering seems modest enough compensation. I feel like the article missed one of the main reasons people steal. They see corporate America frivolously spending and writing off amounts that surpass most employees' salaries. But when it comes to raises, all of a sudden, it's belt-tightening time. Well, I don't steal from work. It's tempting, but I do remember that GD Karma is always watching, even if it doesn't catch you. Karma don't play. Let's see. Donald Trump is proof that karma does not exist. Stephen Colbert. Let's see what this is a long one. But Assistant Ref says, the study by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners found that non-cash property theft, which spans everything from notebooks to Nespresso machines to personal data by employees, has almost doubled in the U.S. in recent years from 11% to 21% in 2018, and they predict the rate of fraud will continue to rise. This doesn't show that this sort of fraud has increased in absolute terms as implied by the rest of the article. It shows a proportional increase in the sort of fraud compared to other sorts of fraud. You can't assume from this that the type of fraud went up. It is equally possible that other forms of fraud went down. In other words, if you have 10 red beans and 10 green beans, and then you take away 5 green beans, your percentage of red beans has increased, but it doesn't mean that you have any more red beans. It just means that you have fewer green beans. Without diving more into the data, you can't okay. So that guy's going at it more from a statistical aspect. Let's see. People shouldn't steal. Eye for an eye leaves everybody blind. The reality that corporations and the rich enjoy an inordinate amount of power and feel entitled to the fruits of your innovation and labor won't be solved by stealing the coffee in the break room. Vote, and as soon as possible, quit your shitty job. Ultimately, I think what everything kind of boils down to here, and I forget if I said this at the beginning, but you know, I agree with a lot of the sentiments in the anti-work and lost generation forum. I would say the one area where I differ in opinion is I think it's not only naive and immature to think that the government is going to take care of you or a company is going to take care of you, but, you know, personally, I have too much pride and too much ego to let somebody else take care of me. I'm going to pull myself up by my bootstraps. I'm going to make my own way. I do think, you know, sitting in a cubicle for 8 or 9 or 10 or 11 or 12 hours a day under fluorescent lights, I don't think that's natural. I think that's a recipe for depression. It's a miserable way to live your life. But I'm under no illusion that, you know, Bernie Sanders is going to come give me universal basic income and I'm going to be able to do pottery and play in the park all day. Like, if I want to live my best life, it's incumbent upon me to do something about it, whether that be to start a business, to learn skills to make myself more valuable. I think I shared a video or something a while back. I'm a huge fan of the FIRE movement, and in this podcast about the FIRE movement I was watching a while ago, one guy talked about, get your financial house in order. If you're living check to check, well, then you're beholden to your employer. And the one guy kind of told a story about how he wanted to go to Africa to visit his wife's family, and he asked for, I don't know, maybe like 3 weeks unpaid. So he didn't want to be paid. He just asked for the ability to take like a little 3-week sabbatical. And his employer said, we don't think that's in our best interest to let you go. And because his financial house was in order, and because he had an in-demand skill set, he was a pharmacist. I don't know why that word slipped my mind. Because he was a pharmacist, getting another job would be easy. He wasn't strapped for cash to where he couldn't go a couple weeks without a paycheck. And he said, you know what? If that's the case, I don't think it would be in my best interest to stay. And eventually, in the end, his employer caved and wound up letting him take that trip. And when you have your own financial house in order, and when you have skill sets that are in demand, the ball is in your court as opposed to in an employer's court. So, I'm curious to kind of hear what you guys think about all this stuff. Go ahead and drop a comment down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, click that subscribe button down below. I'll catch you guys in the next video.